I always think there's something very special about being able to go out into your own garden and pick your own vegetables and produce and fruit. And if you're interested in growing some of your own blueberries, can I suggest that you think about growing this lovely variety here, which is called Vaccinium Blueray. It's a variety that grows about 5 to 6 foot high, and like other blueberries, does best on soils that are on the acid side of neutral. That's somewhere with a pH of around about 4.5 to 5.5. Once you start getting into neutral or calcareous conditions, then you need to think about either trying to modify the pH of the soil by adding a soil acidifier, or better still probably isolating the soil, building up a raised bed, or perhaps even growing them in containers, because it's easy to grow them on a lime-free soil, but not so easy when you've got lime in the soil. That leads to chlorosis, kind of yellowing of the foliage and so on. But one of the great things about this variety is that it was selected for its fruiting ability. And that means that when it crops, and this is an early to mid-season variety, it carries beautiful clusters of these gorgeous, big, very delicious, bright blueberries, large and abundant crops. And what's also nice about it too is that it is, like most blueberries, self-fertile. In other words, that if you've only got one plant and it has all of these flower buds that then open up to have really very pretty bell-shaped flowers that hang from the plant, they will self-pollinate and will set fruit. That said, you get much better crops whenever you've got more than one plant, and preferably also ones that have more varieties that flower at about the same time. Set up good cross-pollination situations, and you can be sure therefore to have an abundant crop from a really good producing variety. Grow it in a sunny or partially shaded site, although they really do and fruit better in better sunlight conditions. You can grow it in a dedicated fruit area if you wish, but I would suggest you think about growing this in amongst other shrubs, because besides the fact that it produces these delicious berries, it's also quite an attractive plant in that, as I mentioned, it carries the pretty little bell-shaped flowers now in springtime, but also pretty foliage that lasts through the summertime, and then often goes a nice bronzy, orangey, reddish shade in the fall, and as you see from this plant, actually persists through the winter time too, so it can be semi-evergreen. So it provides a lot of ornamental interest as well as delicious fruit. Now, what I think is really interesting is that this variety stretches all the way back to 1934. That's when it was hybridized. It was selected and introduced in 1955 and has been around all of that time. In fact, it is one of the commercial varieties that is still widely grown on blueberry farms today. Shows just how important this is as a commercial variety, and also why you should consider growing it in your home. But for me, what's really fascinating about this variety is that its development, in fact, for that matter, the whole of blueberry production as we know it today, stems from the vision of one man. That was Frederick Vernon Coville, a graduate of Cornell that worked for the Department of Agriculture, and he had the vision in 1908 to consider that maybe blueberries could be grown commercially and sent as a crop to markets. You see, prior to that, blueberries were collected in the wild, and there were teams of pickers that went out and seasonally picked the plants, but of course there's a lot of variation with that, a lot of seasonality, and also of course expense too. But Frederick had the vision that these plants could be interbred, developed, and possibly grown on blueberry farms. And he set out near his farm in New Hampshire to find varieties in the wild that would have commercial propositions. And he selected and developed several forms that he found in the wild, and then he published a paper that was called Experiments in Blueberry Production, that was noticed by a lady here in New Jersey, Elizabeth C. White. Her family had a cranberry bog, and they noticed that maybe there might be possibilities in producing blueberries as a crop. So she contacted Frederick. They collaborated and worked together on selecting varieties, and together they developed a series of varieties that were bred and introduced and trialed. And when he retired in 1937, on the farms there was no less than 68,000 different seedlings, varieties that were under trial, and one of those was this variety, Blueray. So you can get some idea of the work and importance of that one man, but also I hope you'll see the resilience and reliability of this very fine variety. This is Vaccinium Blueray, a very important and really delicious variety of blueberry that you might think about growing in your garden.